Good evening. My name is Jennifer Wilkes, and I direct the John L. Warfield Center for African and African American Studies here at the University of Texas at Austin. I'm delighted to welcome you all in person and online to the 2025 Eric Williams Memorial Lecture, the 23rd occurrence of this distinguished series and fourth here at UT. I'd like to continue by acknowledging that present-day Texas sits on the unceded territory of the Alabama Cushada, Caddo, Carrizo Come Crudo, Cuaruitecan, Comanche, Kickapoo, Lipan Apache, Tonkawa, and Isleta del Sur Pueblo peoples. I ask that we also remember the struggles and legacies of Tejano, Black, Asian, Native American, and other peoples who have created this space within the context of ongoing dispossession and cultural violence. The Eric Williams Memorial Lecture would not be possible without community support. I am indebted to the Planning Committee for its smart and generous collaboration. Erica Williams Connell, curator of the Eric Williams Memorial Collection, Research Library, Archives, and Museum. Dr. Lorraine Liu, professor of Latin American Cultural Studies and director of the Archiving Black Americas Project. Ana Molina Amaya, senior administrative program coordinator for the Warfield Center. And Rachel Winston, UT Austin's Black Diaspora Archivist. Likewise, our efforts could not have been realized without our colleagues working behind the scenes and the volunteers who have greeted and guided you this evening. Thank you, all of you. I'm also grateful for our event partners, Dr. Celeste Gonzalez de Bustamante, founding director of the Center for Global Change in Media in the Moody College of Communication, Dr. Carlos Ramos Sharon, director of the Lilas Caribbean Studies Initiative, David Reif, director of the School of Journalism and Media, also in Moody College, and Katrina and Eric Brooks, founders and owners of Austin's Black Pearl Books. Thank you. Finally, I'd like to thank Mrs. Vanessa Ramhit Ramroop, the Chargée d'Affaires of the Embassy of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago in Washington, D.C., for her support. She regrets being unable to attend today, but has sent her greetings and congratulations for a successful 23rd annual Eric Williams Memorial Lecture. Now we'll have the opportunity to watch a short video celebrating the 80th anniversary of the publication of Eric Williams' foundational work, Capitalism and Slavery. And after that video plays, I ask that you please welcome Moody College of Communication Innovation Fellow and UT Austin Jr., Ireland Bluen, to the stage. Thank you.
What he did for Trinidad and Tobago was an expression of love.
No one was a greater fighter. No one was a greater leader than Dr. Williams.
Trinidad's man for all seasons, Dr. Eric Williams.
He was a rare gift to this world's inhabitants.
President of the Dominican Republic, Leonel Fernandez, in 2005 called Williams a great thinker. He enrolled in 1932 to Oxford University to read history. Williams gained a first-place Bachelor of Arts with first-class honors in modern history, an unprecedented college attainment. He successfully defended his controversial and groundbreaking Ph.D. thesis, The Economic Aspect of the Abolition of the West Indian Slave Trade and Slavery. When later published, this work would become a watershed in the history of the British transatlantic slave trade. Dr. Williams' dissertation posited that the abolition of slavery resulted less from profound philosophical and humanitarian concerns than from technological advances and a decline in its profitability. In 1939, Dr. Williams taught at Washington, D.C.'s Howard University. There he compiled and edited its first social sciences textbook. At Howard, Dr. Williams connected with the influential African-American intelligentsia, W.E.B. Du Bois, A. Philip Randolph, Carter G. Woodson, and he taught with John Hope Franklin.
to set up a nation and breathe life into it and provide the principles by which that nation then can live and live on indefinitely. That is a remarkable contribution.
Trinidad and Tobago's first premier, the scholar-turned statesman, navigated its unmoorings from Great Britain and docked his homeland, as he wrote, at its day of destiny, August 31st, 1962. Dr. Williams became the first prime minister.
You, the children, yours is the great responsibility to educate your parents. Teach them to live together in harmony. To your tender and loving hand, the future of the nation is entrusted. In your innocent heart, the pride of the nation is enshrined. On your scholastic development, the salvation of the nation is dependent. You carry the future of Trinidad and Tobago in your school bag.
He was intent on finding a publisher for his thesis. Dr. Williams was elated when the University of North Carolina Press published it as Capitalism and Slavery in 1944. The book was both vilified and extolled for its original stance and intrepid content. 53 years later, in 1997, this landmark study was quoted in the New York Times Book Review as the cutting edge of slave trade research in academic circles. African-American leaders in Brooklyn, New York are vehemently invoking the book. Barclays, the UK banking giant, is paying $400 million for the naming rights of their new basketball stadium. Barclays was one of the principal beneficiaries of slave trade profits. Author, activist, and University of California professor Angela Davis.
Eric Williams was also an activist, a public intellectual. Those of us who were absolutely inspired by the brilliant book published in 1944 by Eric E. Williams entitled Capitalism and Slavery. The overall project of Williams' work was to disprove the widespread assumption that the system of slavery was abolished by the British because of their humanitarian proclivities. In other words, they simply became aware of the fact that slavery was morally wrong, and they quite rapidly moved to correct this infamy. Eric Williams argued that the real reason slavery was abolished was that it was no longer of service to capitalism as it had been during earlier periods, where it played a crucial role in what Marx called primitive accumulation. At that time, disputing the role of British humanitarianism was a scandalous idea. British publishers actually refused to publish Capitalism and Slavery. It was published in 1944 here in this country, but it did not come out in Britain until 20 years later. Not until last year, 2022, was there a major mass market edition of Capitalism and Slavery in England. Random House Penguin published it in 2022. And what is perhaps even more significant is that it became a bestseller 80 years after it was first published. It became a bestseller in Britain. And I think this is a lesson for scholars and activists alike. This work had to wait almost an entire century to resonate in the way the author and people like C.L.R. James thought it should have resonated at the time of its publication.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Ireland Bluen. I'm a junior journalism student here at the University of Texas at Austin. I'm honored to be with you all here tonight and introduce our amazing speaker, Abby Phillip. I've followed Abby Phillip's work since she joined CNN, and as a student pursuing a career in journalism, she's been a role model I deeply admire. Her insight, professionalism, and dedication to the craft are qualities I strive to embody. Phillip currently anchors NewsNight with Abby Phillip, airing weeknights at 10 p.m. Eastern Time on CNN. Phillip takes a sharp approach to the day's biggest stories, driven by facts and the pursuit of truth. With her award-winning background in reporting, Phillip brings unique context to the complexity of current affairs. Phillip keeps the powerful honest and hard-hitting interviews and hosts interesting conversations with a variety of perspectives. Phillip was raised in Bowie, Maryland, and is a graduate of Harvard University with a degree in government. She began her career at ABC News and Politico before joining the Washington Post, and in 2017, she joined CNN to cover the Trump administration and served as a White House correspondent through 2019. Before her current role, she served as CNN's senior political correspondent and anchored Inside Politics Sunday. Phillip has played a pivotal role in CNN's coverage of major political events. She moderated CNN's Democratic presidential debate in Iowa in 2020 and anchored special coverage of election night in America during the 2020 election. In January of 2021, she anchored the CNN special report Kamala Harris, Making History, highlighting the vice president's barrier-breaking career. She has also been a key contributor to CNN's special coverage of election nights, State of the Union addresses, and January 6th committee hearings. Phillip was named Time 100 Next list in 2021, and she was the recipient of the National Urban League's Women of Power Award. When not on television, she spends her time with her husband, daughter, and their pup, Booker T. Please join me in welcoming Abby Phillip.
Thank you so much, Ireland. That was a very nice introduction. Thank you all so much for being here to the L.Warfield Center for African and African American Studies. Thank you so much for this invitation. Jennifer, thank you for welcoming me here to this incredible campus. And to Erica Williams-Connell, thank you so much for tracking me down and bringing me here. It is a great honor to be here, not only because of all of the people who have given this lecture in the past, but also because as a daughter of Trinidad and Tobago, I am honored to be speaking in a lecture series that is named for someone who is so deeply admired by us Trinidadians, and including my parents. I'm happy to have my mom here with me tonight. She's incredibly excited to be here. My husband and my daughter, Naomi, who's 3, is over there as well. If you hear clapping, it's probably from Naomi, because she's super excited to be here. You know, as you heard in that video, Eric Williams was an intellectual giant, and his work reverberated across the globe. Capitalism and Slavery is really now required reading for anyone who is interested in understanding slavery, not only in the Caribbean, but everywhere that it took root. It meant understanding slavery as an economic tool, not just as a means of social hierarchy and control. His contributions inspired generations of scholars and activists and political leaders, and they continue to influence history today. I also have to reflect that I am a product of Eric Williams in another way. For my entire life, I understood that my number one job was to get an education, to educate myself, to move myself and my family forward as a result of that. And that's Eric Williams's legacy too. For a long time, it was almost unremarkable to me that both of my parents, both of them born in a small town in Trinidad and Tobago, were college educated. My father has a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, a PhD. My mother has her bachelor's degree. She also has a master's in business administration as well. And so, an MBA as well. So my parents, their commitment to education started from when we were incredibly young. And that's because they came of age right at the time when Eric Williams was saying to this small island in the Caribbean that this is your key to the future. This is your key to liberation. But Dr. Williams's impact goes even beyond that. It goes beyond scholarship. And for me, as a journalist, it has a special resonance. Here was the son of the Caribbean, a descendant of slaves, refusing to accept a dominant narrative. At the time of Williams's scholarship, as you heard in the video, it was widely believed that slavery ended in the Caribbean because of British benevolence. But he had a different perspective on that, and it was a perspective that broke with conventional wisdom. And in doing so, he did what is so crucial for all of us to do, which is to tell our own stories. Dr. Williams understood something that I think is best captured by an old African proverb. Until the lion learns to write, every story will glorify the hunter. I'll admit that growing up in Maryland, the proud daughter of two immigrants, journalism was not really something that I considered as a serious career. I loved history. I understood the importance of history. I saw early on the critical importance of understanding who gets to write the narrative. And one of the reasons that I chose this profession is my sincere belief that more people like me should write and analyze the history of our time. As imperfect as the media is, and it is, I can admit that, the core purpose of journalism is the pursuit of truth. And that truth is almost always found not in the voices of those with the most power, but in the voices of those with the most at stake. Now, lifting up those voices is essential to combating narratives that might, at best, paint a half picture of the truth, and at worst, be a gross distortion of the truth. It's easy for the people who control the levers of power to do that, and we see it every single day. We're living in a time where saying and writing about things that are not the dominant narrative might get you sent to jail, might get you deported. We as journalists have a part to play too. And in this era where our profession is thankfully more open to more people than ever before, we still have to do something. We have to set standards. We have to set standards for the value of truth and also set standards for the value that is inherent in respecting the perspectives of others. It's our job to counter one-sided or misleading narratives whenever we encounter them. For example, the Earth is round. We landed a man on the moon. Some Americans are worse off than others because of disparities that are the product of systems and laws that were, for many decades, designed to do exactly that. These are all facts. These are all facts. book bans, website scrubs, they can only obscure them. But it is our job as journalists to call them out. Doing that, though, does mean engaging intellectually with ideas that are subversive, provocative, maybe even offensive to you. It's an uncomfortable proposition for a lot of people, I understand that. And it's a question, perhaps this is the most common question that I get from people. Why do I give people who spread maybe misleading or incomplete narratives a platform? Why give them an opportunity to spread misinformation? I think that's an incredibly fair question to ask. It's one that I think a lot of journalists have to encounter and contend with pretty much every day. And I've thought a lot about this over the years, so especially the last decade or so. And I would be lying if I said that I hadn't, wanted to bang my fist on the table in frustration when inevitably someone comes on my show and makes a bad faith argument. So far, I have been able to resist that urge. And I will say, I have gotten pretty good at controlling my emotions and my facial expressions, for the most part, when some truly wild things have happened on NewsNight. But my answer to that question comes down to this. If the job of us as journalists is to pursue the truth, then don't we have to sit across from the table from people who hold all kinds of different points of view? I mean, if we don't do that, don't we relegate them and their ideas to the darkest corners of the internet or to echo chambers where they can fester and grow and spread and metastasize? We allow groupthink to overtake the public discourse when we don't engage with it. Or worse yet, we're going to surrender the opportunity to not only better understand the social and political forces at play, but also to do as Dr. Williams did and engage in the public square and win the argument on its merits. But how we do that really matters. The goal, as a journalist, Amanda Ripley, put it, is not to wash away the conflict. It is to help people wade in and out of the muck and back in again with their humanity intact. Ripley has written a lot about these kinds of difficult conversations. She spent months interviewing researchers who study conflict and documenting the effects of contentious conversations on our brains. Our brains actually behave differently when we're engaged in conversations that get heated. We go into this hypervigilant state, reflexively needing to defend our side and attack the other. That anxiety, that chemical process in our minds, renders us immune to new information. The cognitive impulse to just shut down, that is what is the death knell of the pursuit of truth. Truth is messy, truth is complex, and it's hard. We are incapable of being curious or empathetic when we feel threatened, just in a conversation, just talking to someone who disagrees with you. But journalists have to keep finding ways to engage people with different points of view, finding ways to engage in ways that keep people open to the possibility of new or contrasting information. In this moment, I know that it can feel impossible or even naive, honestly. Values that were once venerated in our public discourse, like moderation, compassion, courage, civility, civic responsibility, all of those are now being openly denigrated by people at the highest reaches of our society. It has become commonplace and normal and almost accepted to show contempt for our fellow Americans. But we have to resist what has happened in the last many years. Collectively, as a society, we've allowed ourselves to be drawn deeper and deeper into the politics of resentment and division. But we cannot stop trying and fighting to claw our way back. We can take inspiration from the not too distant future, as is often the case. It was not much more than 50 years ago that Americans were in the throes of the civil rights movement. We as a country were, as we might be now, sharply divided along racial lines, and the social political landscape was marked by deep tensions, divisions, widespread protest, unrest, even violence. It all reached a breaking point for us, April 4th, 1968. That was the day that Martin Luther King was assassinated. That terrible event caused tensions to boil over from coast to coast. But there were some pockets of restraint. One of them was in an all-Black neighborhood of North Indianapolis. Now, that day, Robert F. Kennedy, the first Robert F. Kennedy, not the second one, Robert F. Kennedy was in the city. He was in Indianapolis campaigning for the presidency. He received word that King had been killed, and he realized that he was going to have to be the one to tell that crowd. So he asked everyone to lower their signs, and then he broke the news to them. There were cries of anguish in the room, tears. He issued to them, though, that night, a simple but a very powerful plea. He said this: "In this difficult day, in this difficult time for the United States, it is perhaps well to ask what kind of nation we are and what kind of direction we want to move in." He went on to ask the crowd not to succumb to bitterness, hatred, and revenge, but instead to make an effort to understand with compassion and love. Now, it's hard to know what impact those comments had on the residents of that city. But we do know one thing. That night, nearly every major city in this country erupted in riots. Every city, except for Indianapolis. It would take the country a long time to recover from the tumult of King's assassination. But we did. We tried and we worked to stitch together the tattered fabric of our society and our shared humanity. And the question I think that we face right now as a society is, can we do that again? Once more, we are at a time of national upheaval, uncertainty, and intense distrust. And against that backdrop, Kennedy's call to the nation to make an effort to understand with compassion and love, it echoes just as powerfully today as it did then. I do want to be clear, though. There are definitely times, divisive times like this, when it can be in vain to try to understand one another. I get it. Some people just simply refuse to engage in good faith arguments, no matter how hard you try. In those cases, it is responsible to give voice to those who are most proximate to events, to those who have the most at stake. At a time when, again, certain parts of the world are being cast as expendable, including parts of the Caribbean, it is the responsibility of every journalist to shed light on all the ways, the many ways that Caribbean Americans, African Americans, Hispanic Americans, and so many others have contributed to the social, economic, and cultural fabric of this country. We cannot allow entire communities and nations to be cynically and falsely vilified to serve a political agenda. As I'm sure is true for many of you, this hits close to home for me. As the daughter of immigrants, I was a young child when I returned back to Trinidad and Tobago and spent my early formative years there. And one of the things I remember most vividly is the deep sense of pride that Trinidadians have in our culture and our heritage, our contributions to music, to literature, to political philosophy, our cuisine, and so much more. Trinis can be downright disrespectful, honestly. They can be downright disrespectful when it comes to how much better we think we are than other parts of the world. But the history of that region is so rich and so important to the fabric of this country, the United States, where I'm proud to be a citizen. I think of Shirley Chisholm, the first Black woman to serve in Congress who hailed from Barbados. Actress Sheryl Lee Ralph, a Jamaican American. Nia Long, whose mother was raised in Trinidad. Immigrants, they play a key role in every facet of American society. They contribute more than $1.5 trillion to this economy annually. And to minimize or trivialize those contributions would be to perpetuate a bad faith narrative that is not the truth. It still matters, the truth. The truth matters. And as proud Trinidadian Americans, for those of us here in the audience, we can and must use our voices to say what we know to be true, that our region is as valuable and as worthy of dignity as any other. Eric Williams taught us that. And it's a lesson that I took to heart and one that I've always carried with me. Before I even knew it, I carried that with me. And throughout my career in journalism, what I also know to be true is that there is a right that we have as people, as humans, to tell our own story, even if that story is different from the one that is dominant and popular at the time. As frustrating as it is to be in the arena, to be in the square of public opinion, I think it's always worth it. I believe, fundamentally, that our greatest freedom is our ability to disagree freely. That is worth defending, especially now. Thank you.
Wow, that was fantastic. Okay, so now we're going to move on to our Q&A portion. So we have volunteers with microphones and one monitoring the online chat. Abby is going to choose 2 in-person questions followed by a volunteer sharing 1 online question. So please wait for a microphone to ask a question. Please make sure your question is a question. And of course, students, feel free to ask questions. Don't be shy. Yeah.
Hello again.
Hello, hello.
All right. I guess go ahead.
Yeah, good
Sir,
evening.
and please introduce yourself. I'd love to know who you are.
Testing, testing. There we go.
There you
we
go.
Good evening. My name is Robert Lilly, and I feel like I'm a Caribbean. I'm from New York City.
Yes,
so,
honorary. Yes.
I'm from New York. But thank you for your message this evening. I've been following your work for a while, and I very much appreciate the way you hold court in the media space.
Thank you.
My question to you is this. You know, the last line that you delivered referred to learning how to disagree freely.
Mm.
You know, I feel like there was a time in our schools where we taught rhetoric, the art of dialogue.
Right.
I've had to, on my own, find ways to adopt those skills. What do we do in a time today when people think the word argument is a dirty word?
Mm. That's a great question. You know, it's so important what you just said, because I think the one thing I've learned from doing NewsNight, and I don't know how many of y'all watch TV. I think the younger folks are probably looking at me like, what are you talking about? But if you watch NewsNight, it's very easy to tell the people who have experience dealing with disagreement and the ones who don't. Sometimes I've actually been surprised to find that even people who are incredibly intellectual, and I know are very smart, and I know are very capable, rarely engage with other points of view that are different from them in real time, and are caught off guard by having to do it in real time on television. I know that being on television in general is tricky for people, so I get that. But my point is that we are on the verge of growing an entire generation of people who only spend time in their economic or in their intellectual silos, where they only talk to people who agree with them. They have decided in their minds that if you don't agree with them, you can't associate with me, so we're never going to talk. So they're not even sure what people who disagree with them believe, but they've decided in their own minds what that is, and so they're content with that. And I think that we have to actually take that on. And I do think you're right, that we probably should do a better job in our schools of facilitating that. In a way, argumentation has become a dirty word. It's become synonymous with just sort of a free-for-all, as opposed to the idea that the best ideas can be tested and can win, right? And I think we need to instill in younger people the value of that. But I also think that we need to be more honest with ourselves about who our friends are, who our family is. Like, chances are you probably know people who don't agree with you on everything, but you probably don't bother to find out or engage with it because it's just not worth it. Or maybe it's just better for everybody to pretend that you're all aligned. But it's okay for you to have a best friend who disagrees with you on things. That doesn't make you a bad person, and it doesn't make them a bad person. And I think we need to get back to a place where we are able to do that, because the way that we kind of find a common place to exist together is to understand where we have real commonalities, where our shared humanity lies. And if everything just gets flattened to R and D and liberal and conservative, then that world is so polarizing, it will become uninhabitable for us to live together. So I do think that we have to work on that, not just in our schools and on TV and all of that, but like in our social groups, in our families, in our communities. That's where it really begins. And I think that the bravery of saying, on our Saturday show, Table for Five, which is the Saturday version of NewsNight, we have the final segment that's called Unpopular Opinions. We like that segment because it is about, in a fun way, because it's usually something kind of irreverent, it usually doesn't have to do with politics, saying that thing that like if you said in your social group, people might be like, what's wrong with you, right? But we all have that thing. And we give people a kind of space to say, we all know that we have that unpopular opinion. Now's the time to say it. And so think about that. There is something in there that is unpopular, that you believe, that you're afraid to say to people that you know and love. And I think we need to drop that fear a little bit and be honest with each other and understand each other better and be okay with people who have different views than the ones that you do. Thank you. Thank you for that question. I'll see where else I see a hand up, so.
Hello, thank you very much for coming, and I really appreciate all the work that you do in journalism. I am a computer science PhD student here, and you know, pretty politically aware of things going on. I am concerned about, you know, the way that media is changing in conjunction with how, you know, smartphones are affecting us in terms of, mostly in terms of attention span. And so I think the splintering of our attention spans has caused a lot of media to just be like clipping things out of context. And so people tend to gravitate toward that, especially my generation, instead of, you know, more long-form newspapers or, you know, linear broadcasting. So I was wondering what your thoughts are in terms of adapting to that, or even helping us become better at paying attention to things.
Oh man, you must have read my mind in a way, because I think you've hit on one of the biggest challenges that I think those of us who are still in linear television, which is what they call cable, which, if you haven't heard, is a dying medium, because younger people they don't have cable and they don't want cable, and they are watching everything on their phones and on their devices. And I think that one of the things that I encounter a lot on my show is exactly what you're talking about. There is an army of people, maybe like half a dozen people, on both the left and the right politically, who watch my show in real time, and they clip to, sometimes it's like 30 seconds, 90 seconds, 2-minute clips that just reinforce their point of view. Nothing that came before, nothing that came after. And the clip is usually something like, Scott Jennings destroys liberal on CNN panel, and right? So if you only got your news, or you understood what was happening on our show from those clips, you'd be convinced that the only thing that ever happens on the show is Scott Jennings destroys so-and-so, or you know, Van Jones flames so-and-so, right? Every perspective has their own clippers. And I think that it's very problematic. I don't have a great solution to it, but it's a real thing. And it completely distorts the understanding of actually what happens, which is that there is debate that happens throughout the show. And that in some of those moments, there are moments that get heated, and then there are moments of actual understanding. There are moments of that are not that interesting to the clippers, because they don't show as much confrontation. And I think that that stuff goes super viral because it's quick and it's easy, and it's like a sugar high. People get exactly what they want. And I think that we, as the media, we have to adjust to that by in a way doing what the clippers do. And we have to get better at curating that content in the format that people are consuming. It might be bite-sized formats, and making them available to people, so that the only options that people have are not just the hyper-partisan options, that they have options for the other stuff that is maybe more informative, that is more comprehensive, that is in better context. And so we have to work on that just people in the media. I think we should probably not be so nostalgic for, well, people don't read long form, people don't watch long shows anymore, people don't do this anymore, people don't do that anymore. At every turn in this business, we've had to adapt to changing ways of consuming information. It's our job to do that. It's not our job to tell people, well, what's wrong with you? Why don't you just read this 2,000-word thing? We just need to find better ways to reach people the way that they are consuming things. Meet people where they are. Because times are always going to change. And yes, people are still reading long form. They're just not doing it quite as much. Yes, people are watching documentaries. They are watching public affairs programming, but they're not doing it as much. And so we need to be in that space, because if we're not in that space, other people are going to be in that space, and it's going to be the people on the fringes. So there are millions and millions and millions of people who want even-handed, fair information. And the fact that that information is not available is not because they're not consuming it, it's because we are not doing it as much. We are slow to the game, and I think we have to get better. We have to get better at all the places and the things that people who are under the age of 30, how they are consuming their news, how they are getting their information, because it's not that they're not interested. It's that we have to accommodate them. We have to go where they are, and we have to get with the times, because we're not going back in time. We're only going forward, and it's only going to get harder and harder to try to stick with the old thing. We have to get with the new program and understand that this is where it's at, and also understand that it's not an indictment on facts and fairness. It's an indictment on our inability to be the type of media that people need us to be right now. Thank you. There you go.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you for being here, Ms. Phillip. My name is Elle Smith, and I'm a local writer, and I am a fan. I watch NewsNight most nights. You're welcome. Listening to you speak today gives me great insight into how you conduct yourself on your show. My question is this. You mentioned curiosity. Curiosity is one of the things that helps me to write. And I'm wondering, what's your process? How do you remain curious about ideas and belief systems that may be not just different from yours, but seem to be not even rooted in fact? Yeah. How do you remain curious about such things?
Thank you for your question, and thank you for watching the show. Look, I think that from the very beginning of my training as a journalist, I always was told that it's important for me to know what I don't know, and to assume in a lot of ways that I don't have the answer to the question before I begin. So a lot of times, I'm like anybody else. I'm like a human being, right? And so there are definitely times when I'm on Twitter all day, and I'm just reading things, and I'm seeing the same things over and over and over again. And absolutely nothing stands out to me as interesting. And in those moments, that's when I realize, oh, you've just been in your own little echo chamber. How do you get out of it? You go seeking information, not just taking it in, what's automatically coming to you. So I go, and I open the National Review, and I'm like, what are they writing about today? I open Reason magazine. What are they writing about today? And I open these other, and those are both, I use those examples because they're both ideological publications on either side of the spectrum. And sometimes it's really important to just see what people are actually saying amongst themselves in places that I wouldn't normally go. Normally, I'd just go to the Washington Post and the New York Times, great. But you will miss things if you only go there. You will miss conversations that are happening in subgroups in parts of the country. So I try to get out of that bubble. And I think that's a big part of curiosity, is getting out of your own bubble and saying to yourself, this seems wrong to me, but do I know that for sure? And then if you don't know, just try to find out. What are the facts here? And the questioner earlier, I'm going to lean on your computer science background for a second, because I actually think this can be really, this is one of those places where technology can help us a lot. One of the things about AI as a tool is that you can just ask a question and it provides answers, but more important than the answers are the sources that it gets those answers from. And you can literally just ignore the answer and just click on the links. Because, I get it. Like, I'm a skeptical person. I'm like, AI just gave me this thing. I don't believe a word. It just hallucinated. Who even knows? But you can go to the sources and just read through the sources. And it makes it faster for you to kind of do something that back in the day used to take us a much longer time. And I actually really encourage you to use AI that way, to help you as an information consumer browse through questions that you need answers to. And that's what I do in my professional life, There are a lot of things that I know a lot about that I'm pretty sure what the answer is, but I still check. I still ask that other question. What am I missing here? And sometimes the answer is, this is just nonsense. Honestly, sometimes that is the answer. But sometimes the answer is, oh, here's this piece of information that I didn't know about. Let me read more about this. And maybe that changes my perspective on something that is being said out in the world. And I think that we have to kind of be willing to dive a little bit deeper. And not to give you more work, but I think you can use technology to help you. Just like how Twitter became a great aggregator, I think Twitter has become much less great at that. We can now just use AI tools to ask questions and get the beginnings of answers and make ourselves smarter and less likely to be manipulated by the things that are being kind of put in our algorithms that are designed to influence our point of view. Are there any other?
Yes, I have
okay.
the mic.
Yeah, if you have the mic, take it.
Hi, how are you doing?
I'm great. How are you?
My name is Dr. Yolanda McCarty Harris. I teach here as an assistant professor of practice in the College of Education doing higher ed law. But there's a couple of questions. But my mother said a shout out to you. She wanted me to tell you. She's recovering from knee replacement surgery. She really, really loves you. I watch you too. But I wanted to ask you a question, and I was looking back, and if my facts are correct, it's saying you began your political career under the Trump administration. Is that your journalism career?
Well, I actually started as a White House reporter covering Obama.
Yeah, okay.
And then after Obama.
Okay,
Trump.
so tell me, what has it been like now covering the Trump administration and now covering it again for you?
Yeah.
On the end of that, I want you to think about, since you talk a lot about curiosity and being in spaces that are different than your points of view, how do you hold space for your mental wellness and health in a time in which we're polarized? Those are kind of like two different kind of questions. But
yeah.
Well,
thank you.
Can put it together as a
thank you for
journalist,
that.
that'd be great.
Yeah, so and they're probably a little bit related in a way. I will say that because I have covered Trump before, I am much less fazed by Trump. So I think there's still a lot of alarm, and I think that's not entirely justified among people who, especially if you're on the left, it's very disturbing to you what's happening. But I've been there before, and I've covered this administration. I've covered the players. I've spoken to them. I've had coffees with them. I've done all of the things. And I think that I have a sense of perspective that that we still actually have a system that works in this country. It works whether you love Trump or you hate him. And that system largely worked in the first administration, creating speed bumps in the road, I think, as it's designed to do, which is to simply say, when an administration comes in and wants to do something, there's a process by which that thing can be reviewed if people want to challenge it. That happened under Trump, it happened under Biden, it's happening under Trump again. And so that knowledge that the process is playing out, that there are many things, and I think the thing, as someone who covers politics and also, and as a result of covering a White House, you're covering things that are happening all over the globe. I think it's important for people to understand that every day under Democratic and Republican administrations, bad, unfair things are happening every day, every day. Sometimes you hear about it and sometimes you don't. And so even when bad things might be happening, we still have a system that most of the time there is a possibility that those things can be reviewed. And there is a possibility of a thing called justice. Justice is when wrongs are rectified, right? And so I don't lose anything when I see things happening because I have seen this before, and I understand that the existence of, and if we lost our heads every time bad things happened in the world, we would not do anything at all. Bad things are happening in the world every single day, and we need to have perspective about it. But also, I think for people who care, and I assume many of you do, you can do things about it. That's the other beauty of the system that we live in, that the citizens actually really do hold the power. And so it's important in these moments for people to exercise that power. I've seen it exercised in the Tea Party. I've seen it exercised in, this civil rights protests in the George Floyd era. I've seen it exercised at all kinds of different junctures in this country. And you can go even further back and see that things change when people act on their outrage. And so as a journalist, it's important for me to keep that perspective. I think as citizens, it's important for you all to decide what part of that system you want to play in. You can be just an observer, you can wring your hands, or you can get up and do something, you can run for Congress, you can show up at a town hall, you can go vote, you can organize your community. I think there are options available to you, and I think it's a fundamental belief in our system that keeps me at a certain level. And on the self-care of it all, there's that. But I also, I have a life. Politics is not everything. I love covering politics, but I don't live and breathe it 24/7 by design. I try to stay informed, but on the weekends, I try to hang out with my daughter. And, it's about balance, because I think, especially these days, there's almost a sense that if you're not constantly posting and you're not constantly doing this and doing that, then you don't care enough. I would say, nothing against posting, but that can't be the be-all and end-all of your engagement with our political system. And for our greater good, I think that we need to turn the volume down on politics and the volume up on relationships. And whatever those relationships are in your personal life, and on weeknights, on the weekends, whatever, turn the volume up on those relationships. And that might actually have a more important effect than simply saying that you did something because you put something up on Facebook or on social media. I think we've just become so over-reliant on that, and it's causing more stress than it is giving people the power to act to change their environment. I don't know where we are on, okay, there you go. I think, oh yeah, you had your hand up earlier, thank you.
Trini in the house.
Hey.
I'm Juliette Walters, and I was just thinking about, I've tried to design my life where I'm not getting bombarded with a lot of things I don't want to get bombarded with, right? Including like a lot of noise. so whatever comes in is just, it's really like big that comes in. And so I was reflecting on the recent thing with the journalist that got the text on the military stuff. And I was wondering, the noisiest part of it has been the spin to me, right? The spin of that, like, that's a serious thing. But the spin, and I'm like, how do you respond to when the biggest noise is the spin and not like the truth or the impact of that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I don't, I think it's hard to tell when what the biggest noise is, actually. I think it's getting harder to tell because so often our understanding of that is like what's happening on social media in particular. And I think it's very skewed these days, what gets amplified and what doesn't. I think the antidote to spin is facts. And just let's not sugarcoat it. I think we all understand what that was about and how big of a mistake that was, and how, as a factual matter, for any person, any one of you here, if you were working in the government at those kinds of levels, if you did that, it would be illegal. And so those are just facts. They're just facts, and we don't have to sugarcoat it. And I think that there are lots of things that are kind of like that. And I mean, I think that you know, maybe it's a judgment call whether you care about it, or maybe there are other parts of this. I think one of the pieces of spin, one of the more amusing pieces of spin was, well, this really just tells us that they're having thoughtful policy conversations. Well, okay, but we all know that thoughtful policy conversations about ongoing military attacks happen in secure places. So I think that just from my perspective, it might be different what I do in the media. I mean, I've been on spring break with my daughter this week, so I haven't been on the air during this story, but we just have to tell it like it is. It's not really a debate whether or not doing that was both wrong and likely illegal. It's not. It's just a fact. And it's also true that they hold the power to investigate it or to not. And the fact of not investigating it should just be pointed out. They won't do it. So, and then you leave it at that. I mean, I think that spin is only powerful as much as you allow it to be in your own life, and you can't control how other people do it or deal with it. But I think you can be pretty clear that, no, I'm not going crazy. Classified information is not supposed to be hanging out in a Signal app. It's just not. And we all know that, and it's the truth, and it's honestly common sense. So when people try to defy common sense with spin, it's, you know, just, for me, I'm just like, really? Like, we know better, and we should say so. And you don't have to back down from it because people are trying to drown you in misinformation, which is, I think, often what happens. Oh, you have the mic. Okay, I think, is there a question right there? Yeah.
Hi, I watch your show. My name is Barry.
Hi, Barry.
And this is kind of more a detailed question about on your show, when somebody's drowning you out or drowning out the other people, and then you start talking and other people kind of stop talking. And I'm wondering if there's a protocol or how you do that. I don't know if that's if that's a question, but I'm just wondering how that works on your show.
You know, you know what? I very much appreciate your description of it, because sometimes it's not like that. They do not listen to me. Yeah, it's not like one of these microphones where I'm amplified over them. It's like, you know, and I'm not a loud person. I really am not. And so, and some of these folks are very loud. And the way that it works is that no, there's not a protocol per se, but I do have to talk to them sometimes like a school teacher or a mom during the breaks and before the show. When I'm talking, you're not talking. When, you know, please, we cannot all, I say this on the air, we cannot hear when we are all talking over each other. And sometimes, I've had to more recently, say, I am talking now. You stop talking. Stop talking. Okay? And sometimes they still don't listen. It is what it is. But I do my best. I think that the truth is, I know it doesn't seem this way. I'll be honest. I know it doesn't seem this way, but I do try to give space to people to have it out. Because sometimes they just need to have the back and forth, and I don't need to get involved. I try to, when I'm jumping in, it's usually because A, I need to move the conversation along, or B, because something is being said that we need a reset on the facts. Or C, it's just too darn loud and people need to stop talking. And so it's usually one of those things. Otherwise, I try to let people talk because the thing about argumentation is that we have to have that back and forth. And sometimes it ain't pretty. Sometimes it is uncomfortable, sometimes it's loud, sometimes people's feelings get hurt. That's real. It is real. And the truth is also that a lot of times those heated arguments happen, then we go to commercial break and people are chit-chatting about their grandkids like it never happened, which is great. I love that because that's actually how it should be, that we disagree. And then people just, you know, actually my producer, since I'm not doing the show, they did a taping of the Saturday show and he texted me and he said, wow, we just had one of the biggest blowouts that we've had on the show in a while. And I was like, oh boy. And then he was like, and then after the show, they just left like they were just having tea with one another. I was like, well, that's good. That's good. Like, let's argue. Let's have a disagreement. And at the end of the day, shake hands, hug, and go get a drink. And that happens often. So sometimes the volume gets turned up a little bit in the room, but it's not because people hate each other. There's a gentleman. Oh, you have the microphone. There you go.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
So my name is Raul Daniels. I'm as close as you can get to Trinidad, which is Guyana.
True.
But myself, along with Juliet and Dale Robertson, we were the original founders of Trans-Caribbean Network of Austin.
Great.
So welcome to Austin.
Thank you.
Sorry we did not get more Caribbean people out tonight.
Oh, that's okay.
But two-part question. So 2 names that you did not mention on your pantheon of famous Caribbean people existing in America. 1, Marcus Mosiah Garvey, who at the turn of the century before the Harlem
100%.
Renaissance, with some of his actions, was seen as a threat, but also one of the more famous people that came out to the Caribbean
100%.
and gave rise to the Rastafarian movement. But then years later, a Colin Powell, who could have ran and won the American presidency, again descended from Jamaicans. So my question, first part, is are we, Caribbean people, a special subset of African-descended people? It might lose you some fans, but I'm asking, right? And if so, if we are special, can we put that naked ambition, if that's what it is, into a bottle and feed it to the African Americans here in America?
Oh, Lord. Oh, he's really trying to get me in trouble now. Oh, boy. Well, Here's what I will say. First of all, thank you for bringing up Marcus Garvey and Colin Powell. And honestly, the list goes on and on. I think the truth is that we as a people, not just Caribbean Americans, but those of us in the African diaspora, we have, in my view, developed a sense of resilience and persistence in the face of incredible odds that have allowed us to contribute disproportionately all over the globe. But we see it here in the United States, culturally, politically, intellectually. Our financial contributions, despite the disparities that exist, especially for immigrant communities, really are notable. And I think that, unfortunately, that has been by necessity, right? Because we've had to survive so much. But I think it is true that because of that survival, we've learned the ability to create things that are novel and new and original. And that is going to continue to propel us forward. One of the things I'll say about the Caribbean, not to skirt your question, but just to say this. I mean, I grew up, as a young girl, like elementary school age, was in Trinidad with my parents and my family. It wasn't until I was much older that I realized the impact of growing up in a culture where I did not really ever feel like an anomaly. And the truth is, this is not something that as an 8-year-old I ever thought about, okay? We moved to the United States and we lived in a pretty multiracial community, but it was predominantly white. But as I've gotten older, I realized that I never really thought about myself in the context of limitations. Partly because I grew up around a lot of people who looked just like me, who were doing everything in society. And and also because my parents literally taught me I could do whatever I wanted. And so I do think that's one of the values of the Caribbean. I think you see it also in a lot of African immigrant communities, where when we, unlike African Americans who always grew up in the context of an existence as a minority in a dominant white culture, those of us who come from these other cultures have a different experience. And that different experience is a window into what it can be like when we finally free our children from the tyranny of those limitations. We have not done that yet in this country, and we have to do that. We have to do that. I think that there is a world out there in which kids like my daughter grow up and they never really think about what was, okay? But we are not there yet. And we have to fight to get there. And we have to fight to get there by continuing to investigate the places where those inequities still exist in our society and addressing them. We have to. And I think some of it is also it's an exercise of the mind as well. We have to just keep telling our kids everything is possible, because everything is possible. We've had Black people at every level of our society. Not enough of them, but they have been there. It is possible to get there. It is possible to get there, and the expectation is that we should all be able to get there. And I think we need to just keep telling our kids that and keep drilling that into them, and then also work to make that actually true in the world that they live in.
My name is Aurora, and I'm Eric Williams' great-granddaughter. And my question is, how can I use social media to improve my community?
Hi, Aurora. Thank you so much for that great question. I think that is a great question because social media is like all forms of media that came before it. It's where the conversations are happening. It's where people are communicating, where they're building community, where they're building trust with one another. And I think there are two things. One, it's about we are the first line of defense for the truth. So before you share, check. Just check. Just try to check. Just take 1 minute and just double check that what you're sharing is either coming from a reliable source or has some basis in fact. I think that's the first main thing that we can do to help clean up our information ecosystem. And then the second thing is that, yeah, continue to share with one another different perspectives, things that you've learned, ideas, books. I learned so much from social media every day because there is so much out there that actually before social media would have been hard to access. And I think that we can continue to, in a way, the more we share about what we are learning, the more we are sharing that learning, but also building commonalities. Because there have been times when, for example, I did a documentary on home births, and when I had a home birth with my daughter, I thought I was like one of very few people to do that, which it's still pretty rare. But it was because a friend of mine shared about her experience doing the same thing that I realized, wait a second, there are a lot of other people experiencing the same thing. And that act of vulnerability in sharing and in sharing what we've learned with other people and realizing that other people are either interested or maybe they share the same interests, that's one way to build community. And I think we can do more of that responsibly. And I think build, closer ties to one another that will help us withstand difficult times in our society. So, yeah, that's my advice. But I think this is where it's at. I'm trying to do TikTok right now, and it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work, but I'm figuring it out.
Well, on that note of youth and community and relationship, I'd like to ask you to join me in thanking Abby Phillip for her generosity and vision.
Thank you guys very much. It's an honor to be here.
Thank you, Ireland, for your deft introduction and moderation. Thank you, all of you, for coming in person and online. And of course, my Black Studies colleagues, Planning Committee colleagues, without whom none of this would have been possible. I'm going to ask our in-person guests if you'll hold tight for just a moment while Abby makes her way out of the auditorium, after which point you're welcome to disperse. Thank you so much, and please take care.